distância. Ajuda-me lá.
Good morning. Welcome you all, esteemed guests and members of the Portuguese research community, to the first ERC-Portugal event. ERC-Portugal is a new program launched by the Portuguese Foundation for Science and Technology, comprising 3 access programs: the ERC-PT Pre-Assessment, ERC-PT A Projects, ERC-PT Careers, alongside a set of complementary initiatives and activities provided by FCT's ERC-Portugal team, one example of which is precisely today's event. This morning, and after the opening session, the President of the ERC, Maria Leptin, will present a keynote speech. This will be followed by a roundtable on linking science and policy for a carbon-neutral and digital Europe. The Vice President of the Board of Directors of FCT, Francisco Santos, will close today's event with a presentation of the ERC-Portugal program, showcasing the various incentives and services made available by FCT. This event is live streamed on FCT's YouTube channel and will be made available afterwards. FCT would like to thank once again the University of Lisbon for hosting this event, and we invite the Rector of the University of Lisbon, Luís Ferreira, to open the session.
Sr. Presidente, Vice-Presidente da FCT, caros membros de corpos de gestão das universidades e de outras instituições, caríssimos professores, investigadores, professoras e investigadoras aqui presentes. Welcome to the University of Lisbon for the first ERC-Portugal event. This event, organized by the Fundação para a Ciência and Technology, with our support, is a key step in strengthening Portugal's roles within the European Research Council's mission to advance groundbreaking science. We are honored to have Maria Leptin, President of the ERC, with us today. Her leadership is a reminder of the importance of curiosity-driven research in addressing major global challenges. I'd also like to thank Anna Paiva, our Secretary of State for Science, for being here. Her participation highlights the connection between science and policy in building a more innovative, sustainable, and digital Europe. Today's event also celebrates the launch of the ERC-Portugal program. This initiative, led by FCT, reflects a commitment to supporting Portuguese researchers and boosting their contributions on the European stage. It's a testament to the value we place on collaboration and impactful research. At the University of Lisbon, we are proud to connect science, innovation, and policy. These dialogues help turn discoveries into real-world solutions. We also celebrate our ERC grantees, who make up 25% of all such grantees in Portugal. To further support research excellence, we recently launched the Lisboa ERC Acceleration Program, helping researchers prepare competitive ERC applications. Thank you all for being here today. I hope this event inspires us to continue advancing science for the benefit of society. Wishing you a productive and enriching morning. Thank you so much.
We will continue our opening session with the President of the Board of Directors of FCT, Maria Leptin.
Good morning, dear Rector of the University of Lisbon. Thank you for hosting this first event, ERC-Portugal. Dear President of the European Research Council, Maria Leptin, thank you for coming and for giving attention to our research. Dear Secretary of State, Anna Paiva, thank you also for being here. Dear scientists, dear ERC grantees, dear colleague from FCT, dear friends, the European Research Council is the most prestigious funding scheme in Europe. It empowers researchers to pursue frontier science and develop their groundbreaking research ideas driven by curiosity. Its bottom-up approach, career-transforming potential, and ability to attract and retain top talent in Europe align closely with the objectives of most of the FCT's funding instruments. Recognizing that Portugal can improve its performance in ERC funding, FCT designed the ERC-Portugal program. This initiative aims to create synergies between national research funding and the EU framework program, establishing a continuum that enhances Portugal's participation in the ERC. The ERC-Portugal program offers a comprehensive set of funding schemes and services to support the Portuguese scientific community throughout the entire ERC application process. It focuses on 3 objectives: enhance the competitiveness of the ERC applications, increase the national participation across all the ERC schemes, and also broaden the participation across disciplines and across institutions. The program provides incentives and services that cover all cycles of participation in the ERC's calls, going from drafting and submission of applications, intermediate evaluation stages, mock interviews, to funding of A projects in order to submit future applications, and also attract and retain researchers with projects already funded by the ERC, or in progress, or completed in the last 24 months. My colleague Francisco Santos, the Vice President of FCT, will provide more details into the program and its various components, but here are some key highlights. ERC-PTA projects supports researchers who received an A score but were not funded, and this scheme allows them to resubmit stronger proposals. So far, we funded 10 PIs that have received a total of 2.5 million. The ERC-PT pre-assessment is a service that helps researchers to prepare high-quality ERC proposals. 86 PIs have already benefited from these services in just 18 months, and this represents about 25% of all Portuguese ERC applications. 184 reports have already been prepared. 60 of them are under preparation presently. 21, for example, online meetings have been held between PIs and the members of the College of Evaluators. And the third scheme is the ERC-PT Careers, was launched in June, and the program is, this part of the program aims to attract and retain ERC grantees by providing incentives for permanent career contracts. And we can say that one ERC grantee is currently finalizing already the administrative process to join the Portuguese institution. Portugal has recently achieved notable growth in ERC applications. For example, more 50% application to the starting grants 24 as compared to 23 was recorded, and also the number of advanced grants doubled in 24 as compared to 23. These figures reflect increasing ambition and capacity of the Portuguese scientific community to compete at the highest level in European research. So we believe the ERC-Portugal program is helping in this positive trend and will help more in the future. Last but not least, I would like to recognize here the dedication of our ERC-PT team, Bruno Bell and Rui Munha, scientific officers at FCT, in the design of part of this program and the implementation of the ERC-Portugal program. Thank you so much, and thank you all for your attention. Enjoy the workshop. Thank you.
Please now welcome on stage to conclude the opening session our Secretary of State for Science, Paiva.
Good morning. Dear Maria Leptin, President of the European Research Council, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Dear Professor Luís Ferreira, Rector of the University of Lisbon, dear Professor Madalena, I always change some names. Madalena Alves, President of FCT, the FCT board members, the ERC grantees, dear colleagues and friends, it is a pleasure to be here today at this first meeting of the ERC-Portugal program. This is a program that the Portuguese research community had been anticipating for quite some time, but only recently, because of many things, under this FCT board, it came through and we have this first event. And as Professor Madalena had already said, the European Research Council grants are among the most prestigious in the world. The ERC supports frontier research, and I emphasize this, frontier research is out there, is in the future, in all scientific areas, from social sciences to technology, fundamental, applied science. For the last 17 years, the ERC has proven to be a valuable instrument for European science. I believe the full length of the impact we're seeing here today, and I believe that Dr. Leptin, in her keynote, will tell us more about it. Thank you again for being here. Portugal has reached the threshold of 100 million euros in ERC grants in 3 years of Horizon Europe, compared with 150 million from the 7 years of Horizon 2020. So we're getting better. This 30% increase is both in funding and project numbers. And it's really a promising sign for us in Portugal, and especially for all of us Portuguese scientists. Overall, almost 300 million have been captured since the foundation of the Council, and grants have been supporting excellent research projects. And I can name a few. ERC grantee Mariana Gomes de Pinho, researching antibiotic resistance, a major thread in hospitals all over the world. Jonathan Reeves, who just received a starting grant to research the impact of the use of stone tools by our hominoid ancestors 2.6 million years ago. Or Luís Mafra, who received a consolidator to study porous surfaces which could better capture CO2, tackling the problem that affects us all, which we are actually discussing here today. And many, many more that I cannot list here, otherwise we would be here after lunch as well. And I know many are sitting in the audience. Over the years, Portuguese institutions, several, have hosted ERC grants. The fact that this event is held in this university, at the rector of the University of Lisbon, is no coincidence. This is the institution with the highest number of ERC grantees in the country. And I hope that not only University of Lisbon, but many other increase these numbers. We believe that the ERC-Portugal program can empower our researchers to believe they can do it, to trust their ability to succeed, leading to increasingly higher success rates and broader participation. And this has been already indicated by the numbers shared by Professor Madalena Alves. I think, and now I'm deviating a little bit, that what we need is the support, of course, but we need to have our young researchers believing they can do it, because they can, and that's what we want with this program. So supporting researchers with an A grade who are not financed due to limited funding, and by offering prospective applicants an evaluation which mirrors what the ERC panels do, FCT, with this program, increases their chances in upcoming calls. The program does more. In this new ERC careers version, just launched in June, supports permanent contracts for ERC grantees in Portugal institutions. And this is important because we want to retain in Portugal, attract talent to Portugal. And that's a particular measure that we want to promote. The ERC is central for European research. In fact, this is stated in the Portuguese government position paper about the next framework program, FP10, that was just published last Friday. I invite you all to read. I know many of you contributed to the first draft, made comments. We took care to incorporate many of the comments made by the community, and now, last Friday, we launched the final document. As the position paper states, the next EU framework program for research and innovation must go beyond the traditional formulas that have been following for the last years. Otherwise, we'll get the same results. So, one of the key issues is funding, always is. Currently, ERC represents 17% of the total Horizon Europe budget. It is expected to bring Europe to the forefront of research and innovation, as defended by the Draghi report. So that amount must significantly grow. Second, ERC funding must reflect its flagship status and enable researchers to pursue groundbreaking discoveries through an open, bottom-up approach. It cannot be top-down. And that we need independence, and we must really tackle this underfunding together with the independence. Excellence is crucial. The Council should enhance international cooperation to access global talent and ideas, supported by high standard evaluations and innovative post-award monitoring focused on scientific excellence. But because research is also collaborative, it's important to also support collaborative frontier research projects that, in spite of not having immediate applications, they may set the ground, actually they do set the ground for future disruptive innovation. Thus, we propose to introduce new collaborative frontier research projects to complement existing instruments. Finally, we know that groundbreaking ideas are the basis for disruptive innovation. We believe there could be more cooperation between ERC and EIT, the European Innovation Council, and as such, the ERC proof of concept that is already in place and the EIT transition could somehow be bridged, creating this continuum between frontier research and disruptive innovation. In Portugal, we're looking at the next framework program with expectations, as we believe in a shared vision for science in Europe. At a time where science and research is more important than ever, Europe and all its member states must strongly support fundamental research along and together with innovation. We believe that only through science, Europe can reach its full potential. Let's support science, but let's do it differently. Thank you.
Let's now proceed with the first segment of our agenda, and please welcome on stage the President of the ERC, Maria Leptin.
Good morning, Professor Ferreira, Anna, Madalena, Francisco. It's very good to be here. A pleasure in this gorgeous auditorium and in this impressive university. I hardly need to make a plea for fundamental research and ERC anymore, since Anna has just done all that. So I'll talk a little bit more globally about fundamental research. The Green Deal and the digital transition have been the centerpieces of the European Commission's policy agenda for the last 5 years during von der Leyen's first term. And since I've become president of the ERC in November 2021, a large part of my job has been to explain how frontier research can contribute to achieving goals such as those. It's not always been easy. Politicians, policymakers, and administrators are under pressure to deliver results in the short term. Their re-election depends on it. All the more so when confronted with a series of major crises, as we've seen over the last decade. And it's so promising, so tempting to promise, we will fund scientists to solve climate change or cure cancer. It's much harder to say we will fund scientists to develop new knowledge, even though we have no idea what that new knowledge might be and how it might help us. The ERC was established to support groundbreaking research across all scientific fields, as we've just heard, pushing beyond what we know now. Unlike applied research, which targets immediate challenges, frontier research explores fundamental questions with no guaranteed plan to immediate applications. Even so, over time, these explorations have proven time and again to yield transformative impacts. Let's look at AI, which many now believe is on the verge of transforming our economies and societies. The recent achievements of some big US companies in this field are impressive, but we should remember that researchers have been considering the possibility of building electronic brains since at least the 1940s, and AI was founded as an academic discipline in 1956. So unlike what many think, AI was not invented when ChatGPT came out. Since the 1950s, the field has been through multiple cycles of optimism, often followed by series of disappointments, as we're used to in research, and loss of funding, which those people termed AI winters. And it's only the dedication and the passion of frontier researchers, like some in the room, who were predominantly working in public sector universities, not companies, and labs, who developed many of the ideas and techniques which are now being utilized on such a massive scale by the big tech companies. And this pioneering work was, of course, recognized with the Turing Prize in 2019, and then this year with the Nobel Prize. The development of AI shows in dramatic form how frontier research can open new markets and industries and contribute to solving societal changes. This type of research is foundational, and Europe's, in fact, the world's future relies on it. And I believe that the curiosity-driven approach has been vindicated by the research funded by the ERC. The ERC has demonstrated the amazing creativity and talent of Europe's best researchers when they're given the freedom to propose their best ideas and pursue them. Between them, ERC grantees have won 14 Nobel Prizes, 6 Field Medals, 11 Wolf Prizes, and many, many others. ERC researchers have advanced knowledge and contributed to many of the wider goals of the EU in terms of the green and digital transitions, as well as addressing societal changes such as improving health or addressing demographic trends. They've made breakthroughs in critical technologies such as quantum computing, solar cells, and stand out as innovation leaders. Although the ERC is aimed at blue sky fundamental research, 40% of ERC projects have produced results that were subsequently cited by patents, far more than other programs of the EU that are dedicated towards this. And about 400 ERC-funded researchers have founded startup companies. So you can see that by funding the best researchers to best on their ideas, you also get all kinds of other impacts for free. And in this way, we can also get unexpected results. These can then provide the answers to questions that we didn't even know we should be asking, and opportunities that we could not anticipate. So let's go back to AI for a moment. Imagine that several years ago, you had the choice to fund research into addressing climate change or curing cancer, or funding some obscure weirdo mathematicians or computer scientists, to pursue ideas that you wouldn't even understand. I think most decision makers would have and did pick the former, climate change, if they were wise, and cancer, which has been funded for a long time. Making steady process in a known field seemed like a wider instrument than taking a bet on an unknown quantity. But I think that as of today, most people would see things differently with hindsight. AI is a general purpose technology. Its potential applications are almost unlimited. And so that's why it's vital that funding for research and innovation is balanced. We can't have one without the other. Focusing too much on short-term results reduces our potential for solving problems in the future. So we must fund. I'm really pleased that recent political developments have made my job for defending fundamental research a lot easier. We've already heard about some of it. It seems like the message about the importance of supporting frontier research has finally reached the highest political levels in Europe. In July this summer, President Ursula von der Leyen, who's just been elected for a second mandate, presented to the European Parliament her political guidelines for the next European Commission for 2024 to 2029. In those guidelines, she promises to put research and innovation at the heart of the EU. I'm quoting her now. Europe's competitiveness and its position in the race to a clean and digital economy will depend on starting a new age of invention and ingenuity. This requires putting research and innovation, science and technology at the center of our economy. We will increase our research spending to focus more on strategic priorities, on groundbreaking fundamental research and disruptive innovation, and on scientific excellence. To do this, we will expand the ERC and the EIC. It's really striking here that von der Leyen chose to highlight the need to focus more on groundbreaking fundamental research and on expanding the ERC. This has never happened before. And this was then followed on the 8th of September with the Draghi report, which again has already been mentioned, which was a report about European competitiveness. Draghi identifies 3 main areas for action to reignite sustainable growth in Europe. His second area for action is a joint plan for decarbonization and competitiveness. And his third is increasing security and reducing dependencies. But the first, and in his own words, most important, he says, Europe must profoundly refocus its collective efforts and closing the innovation gap with the US and China, especially in advanced technologies. He goes on to identify a number of recommendations on how to do this, and one of these is to double funding for the ERC. So the report states that the ERC has become essential for the competitiveness of European science. The ERC's sound reputation is built on a focus on excellence, independent decision-making, and rigorous impartial evaluation. And he states that currently the ERC is not fully realizing its potential as it reaches too few researchers and many promising proposals remain unfunded because we haven't got enough money. This is really striking and noteworthy. Given Draghi's background as an economist, I think many people might have assumed that he would put a strong emphasis on innovation, and he was also a banker, and private sector. But he's also very clear on the necessary role of public sector R&D, the role of universities, and frontier research as the foundation of the innovation in the economy and European competitiveness. So it's good to see that the voice of the scientific community has been heard, and I can only hope that this report marks a turning point in Europe's path. What about the innovation divide? What about countries or regions that do not receive as much funding from the EU or as many ERC grants as they would hope for? So where's the value of expanding the framework program for those countries? First, I firmly believe that a dynamic European research and innovation landscape does strengthen all member states. Portugal and other member states benefit from a strong EU research program, not only through direct funding to the country, but also indirectly. A strong EU research program also helps to create the conditions for a thriving and innovative European single market. And it's in any nation's national interest that its neighbors and closest trading partners have dynamic and thriving economies. It's just as vital that some of the larger EU countries develop new growth engines, as it is for Portugal, for example. And it's possible to reap the benefits of the research and innovation carried out in other countries, especially if those countries are linked in a close economic relationship, such as the single market, especially if the single market functioned fully. If you think of the critical technologies of tomorrow, will Portugal be best placed to access and use them if they were only developed elsewhere and only outside it? No, of course not. Second, even though building up a national research and innovation system requires patience, that does not mean that countries have to wait years or even decades before benefiting from their research investments. And by the way, you mentioned the efforts of the ERC to get more, of Portugal to get more ERC grants, and it's really great. I really have to commend Portugal on the ERC Portugal program. But we also have to remember that these top-level programs only work if the general support for sort of regular science, you can have, ERC funds only a sliver, only a tiny sliver of European research. National funding has to be there to enable the few by giving a good condition to the rest, to everyone. So no country can only rely on EU funding. Even so, if there's one thing that is certain, it's that investing in science today will secure tomorrow's breakthroughs and drive long-term growth. So I'm going to come to a conclusion. Europe is at a crossroads, and again, in Draghi's own words, I cite him, if Europe cannot become more productive, we will be forced to choose. We will not be able to become at once a leader in new technologies, a beacon of climate responsibility, and an independent player on the world stage. We will not be able to finance our new social model. We will have to scale back some, if not all, of our ambitions. This is an existential challenge. So there's a lot to do. Massive investments are needed, as well as structured reforms. We need to fully implement the single market. We need to reform our industrial competition and trade policies. We need to find new ways to jointly finance EU priorities and to reform EU governance. Without clear priorities and more joined-up action, we're wasting our substantial common resources. What we have now is a fragmented research and innovation systems feeding into a fragmented single market. So inventors in one country have their own country and then 27 or more other countries in Europe, but they don't have the entire Europe to implement and to sell their inventions, unlike people in the US or in China do. We've got to change that. So fixing one part and one link will not work. The research and innovation community has a vital role to play in securing Europe's future, but only as part of a broader process of reform. In terms of research and innovation, we face the reality that funding levels currently fall short of the requirements. We're way below the 3% GDP investment that is the aim in Europe. And to bridge this gap, the ERC and the broader scientific community have advocated for doubling of the EU research budget in the next framework program. And the Draghi report, as well as the more recent report, which was led by your former minister, Manuel Ettore, has backed this call. And it's essential that we compete with global leaders in research spending to ensure Europe remains a source of world-leading science and technology. The case of AI underscores the non-linear, often unpredictable nature of scientific progress, as well as the profound societal and economic impact that can arise from patient, long-term investment in science. It also shows how we cannot afford to stand still. The cutting edge of science and technology is a moving target, and the pace of innovation is accelerating, especially with China now, a major and hugely competitive player. The Draghi report was a wake-up call for Europe. Von der Leyen has shown that she's heard the call. What about the rest of us? The ball is in the court of the member states. What we all need to understand is that we don't look beyond our own narrow national interests. It will lead to further collective impoverishment of Europe and its citizens and its businesses. To get out of the slow agony that Draghi warns is happening, we need to implore our leaders to commit to carrying out the necessary reforms and to putting the necessary money behind them. Thank you.
We now open the floor for questions from the audience, and please raise your hands to ask your questions.
Sorry about that. And by the way, I totally left out from my speech anything that we've changed in the ERC about applications, about funding, etc., etc. I thought I'd make this very political, but I will be available in the break if you have questions, or even if you want to ask questions now. So if you want to ask about ERC questions, I'll be happy to take those as well. Impossible that there should be no questions. I'll just stand here until somebody asks. Ah, there's one here.
My name is Cecília Rodrigues, Vice Director for Research and Innovation at University of Lisbon. First of all, I would like to thank you and compliment you for this excellent lecture. This was wonderful. And I took some notes, and I also have another question that perhaps I would love you to comment on. And this is related with the ERC model of fostering both competitiveness and excellence, while also encouraging cooperation among researchers. I feel that at the national and regional levels, particularly in the context of the cohesion funds, sometimes competitiveness and cooperation are mutually exclusive. For instance, I could mention that in Portugal and in regions like Lisbon, for instance, where you find the most competitive centers and research institutions, sometimes the distribution of the funding is not fair, I would say. Particularly because these leading institutions could actually drive development. So my question would be, how can the ERC approach of balancing competitiveness and cooperation serve as a model for regions and for countries? And specifically, what lessons can actually be learned regarding that resources can be equitable, I would say, distributed, but at the same time try to balance these competitiveness and cooperation issues?
Very interesting question and not easy. So I think most of you in the room are probably researchers or have been researchers. And we know that, as a researcher, you want to find out something new. You want to push the frontier of science. So that's by definition competitive, because if it's new, you have to get there first. You have to beat your competitors. But we also, as scientists, benefit from talking to our colleagues. We go to conferences, we hear what's going on, what others are doing, and we pick up on that and we collaborate. So we totally understand that these are not mutually exclusive at all. You have to have them both. And I think this is in particular something we have to keep in mind when we think about this fear of China. Sure, China is not a pleasant competitor, and it's strong emerging. But cutting ourselves off is not an option. We have to collaborate and compete. Now, equitable distribution is not what the ERC does. ERC really brutally goes only for the best. And Europe can afford to have one instrument that does that. What I was trying to say earlier is that national, you could also say Europe should have a Europe-wide general funding program. We need I've always wanted to write a paper in defense of incremental research. Incremental research is used as a stick to beat projects and to reject them. And we want groundbreaking. We can only have groundbreaking research if we also have the incremental research, if we make the small discoveries. And by the way, high-risk research means you may fail. So, but you nevertheless achieve a lot of knowledge in that way as well. So I think that has to be kept in mind. Not everyone can be an ERC grantee. And that's why I was saying, and we see this very strongly, where national governments put money into, solid research and training at universities throughout the country, those countries do well in competing for ERC grants. Where governments don't, and the ministers come to me, to my office in Brussels, and complain that we don't send enough ERC grants to their country, it would be a waste to do that, because there's nothing to support it. So that's what I think, that's my answer. Countries, Germany has a very solid fundamental research funding, and it has a few sort of prizes, like ERC grants. It can only come on top of good funding. Now, you're talking about the regional misdistribution. We see that in every country. In Paris, in France, most of the grants go to Paris, and the rest of the country sort of looks sad. Of course, they also go to the rest of the country, but there's a huge concentration. Well, people like to go, in academia, it. Centers where you have colleagues with whom you can discuss, who are critical and so on, draw the best people. So I think, again, it's just something one has to accept, that there is an unevenness, and one has to fight to keep the foundation working by some wisdom. Somebody right there, and there's another one over there. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Marina Costa Lobo. I am director of the Social Sciences Center here at the University of Lisbon. And thank you very much for your talk. I have two related questions, or two questions. Let's see if they're related. The first is, hearing you, I really enjoyed your points about the commitment of Ursula von der Leyen on the one hand, and also Mario Draghi's report, and how they are very much in defense of science and fundamental science. But hasn't the world changed a lot since, I mean, things go very fast, but it seems like Europe needs to be geopolitical now, from now on, and to what extent will defense concerns and security concerns change this path that Ursula von der Leyen has set, also with the help of Draghi? So how are you seeing this from Brussels? How are you going to defend science, or fundamental science, for all types, when it's going to become a really hard struggle, I guess, even harder than it is now. Yeah. And the second question is about social sciences. You gave lots of examples, but I don't think you gave an example of the social sciences. And I fear that when we talk about science and we need to defend why science is important, it's often the case that social sciences are left out. So how do you also how does social sciences figure in your ERC, in the way that you conceive of the ERC, and how important are social sciences vis-a-vis the other technological
So social sciences. Okay, I'll take the second one first. Social sciences have actually been growing in the proportion of grants. Social science and humanities. I mean, today in this speech I didn't, but look up my other speeches. I always emphasize that. You know, we fund anything from archaeology and religious studies and linguistics, etc. And they're extremely important. And that sector has been rising and gets more than a third of the ERC grants. So it's doing extremely well. The importance of it is also huge. I mean, we face migration, we face poverty in the world, we face everything, you know, the data protection, the tons and tons of stuff. So you're absolutely right. It's mega important, and the ERC funds it big time. So that's important. The other question, I mean, that was a very political question, and you know, I'm not going to speak on what the politicians in Brussels or elsewhere decide. I do think defense is something that Europe has to do together. It's crazy that it's the business of individual countries. We have to defend ourselves as a whole. And so I think it's right that there's been a stronger emphasis on that. It's, of course, very worrying, as you say, that that might funding for that might be taken out of programs that should be reserved for fundamental research, as has already partly happened. And there are many who are trying to ring fence the fundamental budget in Brussels, and I hope that'll become clear that money has to come from elsewhere. But that's really high politics.
Okay, hi. João Ramalho Santos, University of Coimbra, Vice Rector. I will, well, I'll ask you a question I already asked you in January in Brussels a while ago, and see if there have been developments. The point that you're making is obviously the great one. All the finance ministers say they love us. They really, really love us. And then there are cuts, and you're the first to go. That's basically it. But my question actually has to do with, and that's unavoidable, I guess. My question to you has to do with the interdisciplinarity in the ERC, which I did ask, and you said you had some sort of, we were thinking about ways of, you know, promoting interdisciplinary projects that usually fall because people go always for the disciplinary ones, which they understand much better, and all of those fall by the wayside. Yeah. And I was wondering if there's new thoughts on that.
Well, all sorts of thoughts, but nothing has been implemented yet, not least because the person who's in charge of that project from the council has not been well, so reality hits. yeah, so it's really, data show that those projects that have all the expertise in their own panel fare better than those where reports from other panels are needed. It's a really depressing statistic, and we're going to have to, it is on the agenda, and things unfortunately happen slowly. But I was reminded again, I sat in on the PE6 panel, physics and engineering, and they get, it's computer science, and that relates to so many things. So in computer science and AI, it's becoming particularly bad now because people are developing AI to solve problems from other fields, and the panel is in despair. So it's becoming more acute, and I'm very glad you're reminding me again, although it's right up. Good, good, good. Okay, please do. But everyone reminds us, but nobody has a good idea. So they say interdisciplinary panels, but we have 27 panels. Which ones are you going to match up in an interdisciplinary way? It's going to be 27 by 27 at least. It's yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes, but where do we get them? Yeah.
Last question, please.
Research, and my name is Pedro Rezende. I'm president of the Center for Mathematical Analysis, Geometry and Dynamical Systems at the University of Lisbon. And because of that, I often find myself at the far end of fundamental research as far as hard sciences is concerned. And I noticed that there has been in Portugal one ERC grant in mathematics ever for a researcher, which is in our center. And I'm trying to figure out the reasons for this. Is this because mathematics is also underfunded in Europe, or is there a Portuguese situation here that should be addressed?
I have no idea. We would have to look at the statistics for how many mathematicians from Portugal actually applied, and then look at whether their success rates are lower. I don't know. Look in your department and encourage the best to apply, and make sure you get the ERC-Portugal program to support them. This mathematics is extremely uneven. Of course, Hungary does extremely well, and Poland does extremely well, and other countries do less well. Can't give you an answer there. There is a correlation between the strength of the field and of course the people who apply. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good.
We now invite you for a coffee break, which will be served. Will be served downstairs in the main hall. We ask you to reconvene by 10:20. Thank you. We hope you had an enjoyable coffee break. We'll now proceed to the roundtable on linking science and policy for a carbon neutral and digital Europe. Please welcome on stage the President of FCT, Madalena Alves, who will moderate this session, as well as the participants, namely our Secretary of State for Science and Paiva, distinguished members of our Portuguese scientific community, André Martins, Instituto Superior Técnico, University of Lisbon, with the main research interests on natural language processing and machine learning, and Helena Freitas, University of Coimbra, with main research interests on ecology and biodiversity, and the President of the ERC, Maria Leptin.
Well, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce my guests in this roundtable. Anna Paiva, Secretary of State for Science, but also a scientist with interests in diverse fields like effective computing, I like this one, virtual agents and human-robot interactions. Maria Leptin, President of ERC, but also a scientist and former President, for example, of the European Molecular Biology Organization. André Martins, Associate Professor at the Computer Science Department and at the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department at the Instituto Superior Técnico. Among other achievements, André received 2 ERC grants already, starting and consolidated. And Helena Freitas, full professor of biodiversity and ecology at the Department of Life Sciences of the Faculty of Science and Technology of the University of Coimbra. So welcome. Thank you for accepting to share this conversation with our guests and participants. We will discuss how excellent science should help achieving the ambitious goals the Europe has today in digital and green transitions. We know Europe faces global challenges ranging from climate change to digital transformation and a severe competition for the brightest minds. The EU must enhance its attractiveness to top talents and foster collaborative ecosystems. I ask in the beginning for statements, 5 minutes for starting with Professor Helena Freitas. So 5 minutes of thoughts that you want to share with us in these topics, then we pass to André. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this kind invitation to join this panel today. I guess I'm going to use essentially my participation in a mission board for climate change adaptation as an approach to this specific talk on the critical research needs for carbon neutral Europe. As has been said, I'm an ecologist. I'm a professor of biology, ecology, and biodiversity. So, I mean, I will emphasize some of the agendas that I think will contribute in terms of research for this carbon neutral Europe. Achieving a carbon neutral Europe is central to the EU's climate and sustainability ambitions, requiring a transformative approach across energy, industry, mobility, land use, and governance. This transformation must be supported by research that bridges science, policy, and technology, ensuring that innovation leads to practical and fair solutions. One of the most urgent research priorities lies, obviously, in advancing clean energy technologies. This includes improving the efficiency and affordability of renewable energy systems, such as solar, wind, hydro, and geothermal power. Equally important is the development of advanced energy storage systems, including next-generation batteries, hydrogen storage, to ensure a reliable energy supply. Integrating these solutions into smart, resilient grids is essential to balance supply and demand across diverse energy sources. So this is 1B, it's of course one of the pillars. The second one, decarbonizing Europe's industry, presents another critical challenge. Research into carbon capture, use and storage, simultaneously the electrification of industrial processes and the design of circular economy systems can reduce emissions and waste. By developing materials and technologies that promote resource efficiency and reuse, industries can transition to more sustainable practices while maintaining competitiveness. The transformation of the mobility sector is essential for achieving carbon neutrality. I'm not going into detail, but of course research is needed to accelerate the development of zero-emission vehicles, particularly electric and hydrogen fuel cell technologies, alongside infrastructure to support widespread adoption. I prefer to emphasize the role that nature-based solutions offer, a dual benefit of mitigating climate change and preserving biodiversity. Enhancing carbon sequestration through afforestation, reforestation, and soil management requires a deep understanding of ecological processes and their scalability. Sustainable agriculture practices, including agroecology and precision farming, can reduce emissions while ensuring food security. Restoring ecosystems from wetlands to degraded forests is vital for maximizing their capacity to absorb carbon and support biodiversity. And of course, in this, we have two very important European strategies for 2030. One of them is the EU Forest Strategy that was adopted in 2021 and is being updated, and with a number of economic and research interests, like enhancing biodiversity in forest ecosystems and ensuring restoration of degraded forests, sustainable forest use, aligning forest management with climate and biodiversity goals, including the sustainable use of wood and non-wood products, monitoring and data collection, and a number of other essential topics. The EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030. This strategy aligns with global frameworks such as the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It sets ambitious targets to reverse biodiversity loss and integrate conservation into various sectors, protected areas, expanding the EU network of protected areas to cover 30% of land use and sea. This is a major achievement with a lot of research that is going to be needed in order to have the best areas and protect biodiversity. And nature restoration, restore the restoration of ecosystems, which is now supported by the Nature Restoration Law, which is a very strong political instrument. Together with a very good research agenda, can really bring and make a difference and put Europe not a living lab, but as a pilot, for the world, I hope. Of course, the human dimension of climate change cannot be overlooked. Research into behavioral change is critical to understanding how to encourage sustainable consumption patterns and lifestyle shifts. Ensuring a just transition requires insight into how climate policies affect vulnerable populations and how equity can be integrated into decision-making. Engaging citizens through participatory governance models will build public trust and accelerate collective action. Addressing the complexities of climate action requires interdisciplinary and cross-sectoral research. Models that integrate the energy, economic and environmental dimensions of the transition can help policymakers navigate trade-offs and synergies. Research into climate resilience is also vital to adapting Europe's infrastructure, ecosystems, and communities to the inevitable impacts of climate change while advancing tower neutrality. Adopting agroecological practices alongside reducing food waste, promoting plant-based diets, and enhancing supply chain efficiency is critical for transforming the European food system and achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. Finally, education and capacity building are crucial for fostering the green economy. Research into skills development programs for renewable energy, green technologies, and sustainable practices will ensure a smooth transition for industries and communities. Enhanced STEM education, incorporating climate science and sustainability, will cultivate the next generation of innovators and leaders. I firmly believe that Europe has the potential to lead the global transition to a carbon-neutral future, showcasing how science-driven innovation, inclusive policies, and active citizen engagement can collectively build a sustainable and resilient society. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Elena. André, can you make your statement?
So I had some slides. I believe they are going to be projected.
Sorry, can you put the slides, please?
Okay, so can you hear me well? Yes? All right, so I'm going to talk to give a little bit of the perspective of artificial intelligence, both in terms of fundamental research and innovation, and how both can be combined. So let me start by introducing myself. This is my team. I'm a professor at Instituto Superior Técnico. This is the lab that I'm leading. I've been very fortunate to have been funded twice by the ERC. The current project that I'm working on is called Decollage, and the goal is to build a new wave of biologically inspired models for language generation that addresses some of the current limitations of existing models. I'm not going to list them all for the sake of time. Oops. But one thing that is important to stress here is that this challenge is not something that can be done with incremental progress. They really require fundamental research and curiosity-driven research in order to address them. And at the same time, several of these challenges also offer several opportunities for innovation. So let me start by recapping the report from Mario Draghi that I'm sure many people here already saw, and the need to close the innovation gap with the US and China. So there are several important points in that report, but one of them that is very striking is that there is only about 1/3 of patented inventions in European universities that end up commercially exploited, which is a low number. And a reason that is pointed out for this failure has to do with the fact that researchers in Europe are less integrated in innovation clusters, which includes universities, startups, large companies, and VCs. So there are several recommendations that are made in the report, including doubling the support for fundamental research, a new regime for world-class researchers, policies to attract talent, policies to improve infrastructures to scale up. I'm going to talk about several of these things, starting with innovation clusters. It's really important to have ecosystems that put together all the stakeholders that go from fundamental research to innovation and technology takers. We have a very good example in Portugal that I want to mention, the Center for Responsible AI, which does exactly that. So this is a project that involves 25 partners that includes research centers, startups, industry leaders, and the goal is precisely to do all this trajectory, framing it as a virtuous cycle. So maybe this is a model that could be an example to Europe, or maybe other centers like this can be inspired by this idea. So the other point I want to mention is supercomputing and in the context of AI. Europe is very strong in these aspects. There is a very large computation infrastructure in Europe, where in the top 10 supercomputers in the world, 3 of them are part of the EuroHPC, which is the European network of high-performance computing, including two computers from Portugal. And the report, again, Mario Draghi's report recommends also increasing this computing capacity and to use it for the training and algorithmic development of AI models. And I think this is really an opportunity that we should use. I'll mention this example because this is fresh news from today. So I'm involved in one of these initiatives, which is being run in the EuroHPC. And today we are releasing an European large language model that supports all the official EU languages. And that is competitive or better than other models that are done outside Europe. And right now this is the best EU-made model of this size. And it's fully open, it's multilingual, which are features that are very important. So this is only possible because we put together a large team of institutions across many countries in Europe. This includes partners in Portugal, France, the Netherlands, and the UK. And I think this is really the way to go for Europe to compete in this space. There is a general trend in artificial intelligence for problems that involve scale to being solved by very large teams, very large collaborative teams, with a model inspired from experimental physics, with the big science projects. This requires coordination and advancing in multiple streams in parallel. But I think really the way to go is to do this as open science projects. Particularly, Europe has a very strong tradition on open source that I think is what we could use as a way to compete with the big tech companies. So just a final note about talent attraction, networks, and partnerships. Talent attraction is a very important thing to take into account. Salaries in Europe currently are not competitive with salaries, for example, in the United States. We need to pay attention to that. I'm listing some things here that are relevant in Portugal, and maybe some things that should be discussed at European level. For example, the idea of creating a U-share position, that is one of the ideas in Draghi's report. And I think this mimics what is done, for example, in Canada, where they also have a SciFar AI share for strategic areas. Maybe you can also think of these not just for professors, but also for PhD students, postdocs, so that we can have more mobility instead of competition across state members by using networks and partnerships. So I'm just going to mention 2 examples. One is a network called ELIS. It stands for the European Laboratory for Learning and Intelligent Systems. It's the strongest network in Europe in the areas of AI and machine learning. It includes 41 ELIS sites, so it's like a distributed network in 17 different countries, including Portugal. The other example I want to bring is partnerships with universities, even outside Europe, and one example of that is the CMU Portugal program, which Portugal has with Carnegie Mellon University. I was myself a student and an alumni of this program. This is a program that offers PhD dual degrees, several training initiatives, exchange programs, and so on. And I think it's an initiative that can help bring knowledge from outside Europe into Europe. This is it. Thank you.
And policy for a carbon neutral and digital Europe. So we have here several important members of our research community and also government and very important funding agency. So we have here we intend to promote a discussion about this connection between scientists and policymakers in this respect. So my first question, I don't know, I will pass these 5 minutes, initial 5 minutes, because both you, Anna and Maria, you had already opportunity to make your speech. But for Europe to make a success in this green and digital transition and in this path to climate neutrality by 2050, it is said that Europe should be pragmatic and harness the potential of the green and digital transition to create markets, industries, and high-quality jobs. These jobs of the future. And for that, I would launch a general question about what would be these jobs and what values and practices do you identify to be the most relevant to promote the European research competitiveness in these domains? So I don't know who wants to start.
Well, governments can do a lot. And in the area of research, Andre has already mentioned some. He's given your own government some ideas about what they could do. I think in general, attracting talent is of course important. We can discuss what EU chairs might be. Certainly bringing back people with good salaries and other conditions is important. So one of the most important conditions, I think, is the fluidity of research careers. You know, we have the European research area in name. Do we have it in reality? No. Researchers still can't take pensions from one country to another. I know this from my very own husband, who couldn't take his pension at the full level from UK to Germany when UK was still in the EU. Our degrees still aren't fully transferable between universities, so people with a bachelor from one country qualifying for a master's in another, that's still not working seamlessly, never mind the other steps. So that's one thing. We don't have European-wide career steps. But in some countries, we simply don't have freedom and perspectives for young people. You know, there are old encrusted professorial structures with professorial empires. People are talking about tenure track. Germany has introduced tenure track, and unfortunately, it's not what tenure track means in the US, so, where they're always looking. So we need flexible and open career structures and, of course, good salaries. Countries can do something about that. So UII people must know that Bulgaria, for instance, has started an institute on computer science and AI, Insight, which was started with the help of a Bulgarian expat at the ETH in Zurich. And they've introduced many changes, legal changes that enabled Insight to recruit people from outside, high salaries that go much above what the regular university salary is, freedom, visas, all these things. It can be done, and it immediately has effects. So we need these examples for our governments, and we can shout forever. I mean, I'm very glad about all your ideas. You should go straight to the EU and tell them, if they're talking about a European AI Research Council, that stuff would help. So we have to keep shouting, but really has to be done at the highest level.
Thank you. Now, thinking about science and policy and the values underlying this link between science and policy has to be seen in two directions, right? The way science can influence people doing politics, but also what we do where we put the right incentives in order to promote science. So these two directions are guided by these values of autonomy, of values that as a society we want to promote better results for our people. And in reality, this link science policy and policy science, I believe is more and more important. Since I started, I've been bringing the idea that decisions have to be based on data, have to be based on science, have to have something that really underlines why do I put this incentive? What's the reason? What's going to be the outcomes? And in fact, that's one of the reasons why what we've been doing has been looking especially in putting the right incentives in terms of careers, because science cannot be done without the scientists, and the career and this flexibility, the possibility to go from one university to another, from one sector to another sector, and then going back. That flexibility in the careers of our scientists is something that is so important for science in the future. So yeah, science, talent, linking the two is important. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I would maybe give the floor to my colleagues and then I'll get back to you again.
Okay, thank you. Well, in terms of, if I would have to consider the key values for success, I would go for, first of all, sustainability. I think that the sustainability agenda is going to be cross-relevant within all science and between the science and innovation. So aligning research with long-term environmental goals, sustainability goals are extremely important. So we have to trust that there's a long-term agenda. For example, now we are facing some indefinition in terms of what's going to be the next generation of policies, European policies in general, and we've been discussing that. But so we need trust in between this dialogue between science and policy. And so aligning research with long-term sustainability goals, I would say, is going to influence all the research community. A second value would be collaboration, has been said. So strengthening, as Maria was saying, EU-wide and global partnerships, fostering open science. So we do have the name, but it's the fact that we have to implement it through and to strengthen these EU partnerships. So this collaboration would be the second one. Another important goal that I think that research can do much better is in terms of innovation for public good. So there's perception that science is really a major player in terms of bringing knowledge that is needed to drive an agenda of public good. So addressing societal needs like health, equity, digital inclusivity, these kind of values, that's this perception. It will help the dialogue in between science and policy as much as we push this innovation for public good. That's the idea of the missions is very strong, very powerful, and I expect this idea of the missions really to get some support of the next, group of policies of research. So this would be the third value. And the fourth value would be resilience, emphasizing the adaptability and research to the dynamic of challenges. And that's something that can also be, in terms of policy, I think it's again, another agenda that has been, resilience is more and more, part of the perception of the research agenda as well. And a fifth value I would bring in is the ethical responsibility and the ethics and So this again, it really gives, in terms of the perception of this bridge between science and policy, it is a very important agenda as well. So I would go for these 5 values for the success of the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, so I think almost everyone mentioned all the aspects that I wanted to emphasize, but I'll stress again the importance of attracting talents and creating policies that allow for European researchers to stay in Europe. Apart from salaries, I think Insight is a very good example of a center in Bulgaria where they, managed to create the conditions to attract talent, international talent. I would love to have something like that at European level, something that is not at the national level, but something that allows researchers to conduct their research wherever they are, where they don't need to move to a center which is in another country to have the right conditions to do their work. So this could either be done in parallel by all countries in the EU, or maybe there could be EU policies that make it possible and try to harmonize things and work a little bit more as a federation. And so the other point is, again, the innovation clusters that I briefly mentioned in my introduction. It's very important to bring a path that starts from fundamental research, where the groundbreaking ideas are first made and executed, and give the opportunity to create innovation around them. And for that, what we see for example, in the United States and in other places is that often in these ecosystems there is a big proximity between universities, startups, companies. I would love to have more of that in Europe. For example, in the US, I was at CMU for 2 years, and all my colleagues did internships in companies during their PhDs. This is still not commonplace in Europe. There are other differences. For example, PhDs in the US tend to be longer than in Europe, which also gives more room for exploring and making mistakes before settling on a research topic. In Europe, it's different from country to country, but usually not that long, and so on.
Because I forgot, and I think they're relevant now. It's facing the new times. It is really, we need a lot of trust. Science is going to be really pushed, I think, considering what we have in terms of new players in these big countries like the US and so on. And I think there's a time where we need to show that science can be really a major player in supporting humanity. And I would say that it's a time for evidence-based strategies tailored to decision making. So we have to clearly show that with evidence that there are strategies that really bring the solutions, and show that it's possible really to make decisions based on these evidence-based strategies. This would be one. And another one is, it's also time, probably we have, increasing partnerships, and of course collaboration is a major critical issue, but maybe partnerships that show the exchange of global best practices, not only European-based and European-centered, but also because we do a lot in terms of global research, and Europe is a major player in doing supporting research worldwide. So maybe it's time to come up with partnerships that have this power of being global, and showing the best practices that we have at the global level. I don't know. Maybe it's time to push this as an extra exercise.
Thank you. Next, accumulating the microphones. Maybe after this first round, we could discuss a bit about the cooperation outside Europe. How do you see the collaboration across borders, and how should we define common standards on integrity, respect for intellectual property, also safeguards for researchers, freedom, and also consolidating trust among government, scientists within and across countries and regions. So we and André brought this CMU Portugal programs with the US. We are discussing these partnerships. So my question is, how do you see this cooperation with other regions to promote the European competitiveness? I think this is an important aspect. Maria also mentioned already China, and of course, not only China, but I think it's important to reflect about this.
Yes, I've already mentioned the inherent competitiveness and cooperativeness of research. And of course, we've got to get that right across borders. I think most of us naturally collaborate with our colleagues outside Europe. And in fact, you know, what is outside Europe? So the ERC and EMBO both include Israel and Turkey. So we have these associated countries that we feel are part of our sphere anyway. And many Horizon Europe include countries, you know, there have been agreements made with China now, South Korea's in the make, etc., etc. So there is cooperation. It's natural and it's happening. What's not so good is, of course, the fear of being spied upon. But again, it's the same as for us as individual scientists. I used to have, you know, your postdocs and grad students go to meetings and they'll come before and say, Maria, are you sure we can talk about that? Isn't somebody going to scoop us? I said, you know, you don't talk about your research, you don't get good feedback. And sure, I've had nasty experience, I think 2 or 3 times in my career. But on the whole, you get more out of cooperation than you give away. Now, of course, you don't cooperate with hostile cultures, and I'm afraid there is some hostility in certain countries on topics about which they're aggressive. So you leave that out. But you know, cooperating at other levels on other projects, I think is really important. We need to keep together. We need to stay together. And so I think we should foster cooperation with those countries, and you know, China stands for them, that are seen as hostile now. I think the US have demonstrated how badly wrong it can go to sort of over-regulate and clamp down in their China initiative, which they fortunately withdrew after 2 or 3 years. So I think we must be open. Carefully open, but open.
And this is part of the academic freedom and autonomy?
Well, I'm German. For me, academic freedom means something else. It means you're not told what to think and teach. It's much narrower, and it's enshrined in our institution, and I wish all countries did that. It's really good. So at the university, you're free to research whatever you do, and to publish whatever you like. Now, all freedoms are constrained by other freedoms. So you're not allowed to, you know, make racial publications and so on, or lie. And the same goes here. Freedoms are constrained. I think this is not a case of academic freedom. It's more, and it's not treated as that. It's called research security, and what is meant by that is economic security. So it's political. It's not academic freedom. I don't know a good term, but I think one shouldn't muddle those two terms. You know, we can research what we want, but we're told to be careful about not being exploited economically. It's a different thing.
Yes, thank you.
What else can I say? Indeed, I think science is global. So you cannot think it's constrained into the borders of this particular country or this particular area. It cannot be done. It's not like that. So cooperation, it's essential for growing our knowledge. And of course, we should not say, well, we are just inside Europe. We have to open both to America, but also to Africa, to other continents that really will provide knowledge that we don't have because of the different way that we work and do research. So in fact, in the position paper of Portugal for the FP10, we have a sentence there to promote this collaboration with countries in Asia, in Africa, in South America, exactly because we need to think globally. And many problems can only be solved with a broader, especially problems in environment and climate, they need to be solved at the global level.
I mean, I fully agree, and I would like to add that a good example is what is happening in our COPs, for example, the climate agreements. I mean, Europe has been we've been playing a major role in terms of showing that it's possible and really that cooperation is part of this process of change, and Europe is considered to be. We are keeping the agenda on, and I think the role that the European leaders have been doing in these international agreements is the best that we can have, because it's fostering collaboration and showing that. This agenda has to be global, and we have to commit and work together in order to really to change. But saying this, I think that we can do much more in terms of research and collaboration, especially with the Global South, or the so-called Global South. I don't like the expression, but in this, because research agenda is also seen, and we shouldn't forget, as an agenda for peace, for bringing harmony, for this commitment, collaboration, and the COVID situation was really a breakthrough, and we managed to show that science can bring solutions at a global level. So this is extremely inspirational and should keep, because as Maria was saying, the situation in terms of the political situation is not easy for Europe. Now we are really getting a lot of pressure from different geographies, and we are more and more. But if we keep this capacity of being, open and collaborative, and especially bringing solutions that we need is really important. So I would support what has been said and say that in the environmental agenda, in the green agenda, there's no other way to go. So to proceed, and that's where we have to go.
I don't have anything to add. I think we are all in agreement about how important it is for science is global. So I agree with all that. Something that maybe I want to bring another perspective is the importance of research freedom. This reminds me of something that appeared in the social media yesterday, where a very prominent researcher from a big tech lab in Europe was saying that the other researchers in his lab were getting forced to sign a non-compete agreement for 6 months, which will prevent them from leaving the company and start another company and do the research that they want. This is very bad for Europe. So we are talking about big tech companies that operate in Europe. They are not European, and are making it harder for researchers that work there to leave and to start their own company. So it's important to look at this aspect again that goes from research to innovation, and create first, I don't know if that is even legal in Europe. In some countries it is not, to have these non-compete agreements. Someone was pointing out that in Canada the law prevents that from happening, but it's really important that us researchers appreciate the freedom that we have to do our work and to make sure that Europe creates the conditions for that, and also gives again a path for people who are doing research, if they want to become innovators and start their companies, have good conditions for doing that.
Can you clarify, was that a commercially funded company or a fundament or
It was
public money?
It was a research department in a big tech. It was Google, and it was Google DeepMind. So it was like a very famous research, blue sky research department in a company. Yes.
Industry can do what they want.
But that creates a problem, right? So you have like offices from these companies in Europe and European researchers that work there, and ending up being limited in their capability of living. And what?
6 months is okay.
I'm not sure if it was 6 months. It can be more. I'm not sure. I think.
So we are almost finishing. We have time for any question that the audience can ask to our esteemed guests. Yes, please.
Good morning. My name is Hugo Cardoso. I'm Associate Dean for Research in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities right across the street. And I'm very happy that the discussion initially pivoted towards this idea of mobility within Europe, because this allows me to raise an issue which undercuts our competitiveness here in Portugal, specifically in the case of ERC, which is that very often you have researchers who are interested in the portability clause of their grants to bring them to Portugal, but then these conversations break down because we have very restrictive hiring policies, and of course our pay grade is not comparable with other countries. And I understand that the ERC essentially respects whatever the member states do in their legislation. My question is, do you think there's some sort of avenue for the ERC to talk to the individual governments to make sure that this flexibility comes about, or do we need to wait for individual governments to make this decision?
I don't know exactly where the constraints are there. So, I mean, obviously the ERC cannot interfere in national government's legislation. ERC funding can be used to top up salaries, but of course it has to go through the institution. Many countries do. So if you want to tug my sleeve afterwards and tell me whom to talk to, I'll be happy to do that. But all we can do is make the case for it. We can't stipulate or intervene in any way. But I mean, many countries do use that to bring people back from abroad, from the US or so, with good salaries, and so it can be done.
Thank you. Any more? We have time just for one more question, and then we go to the ERC-Portugal program. Yes?
Well, we all agree, I think, that science is global, but regarding the mobility, the academics tend to be very selfish and very close in our system. So I would see that a challenge and the opportunity to increase and to foster the mobility for the companies. I mean, not the companies in their own country, but the companies in other countries and eventually in the United States. So I think we are still, as far as I think, that we are thinking on the system that is very close and the mobility in Europe or in our country. But I would see mobility with companies to other countries. We need to interact more with the companies and increase, as we have said, the impact of our science in the society and in the companies. This is a challenge that I would like to lead.
Yeah, I think Madalena can answer that because, in fact, FCT has been promoting both PhD students in companies, and we will be launching, I don't know whether Francisco will be talking about that, a program with companies in order to do postdoc, it's not postdoc, graduate, people with doctorates in companies supporting FCT is going to do that. And I think that's important, this link between academia and our companies and this, fostering the moving of ideas from our universities, from our research centers into practical applications that actually have impact in our society is very important. And FCT is doing that at the moment. Of course, it's limited to Portugal, but I believe that some of the programs that we have at the European level is trying to do that as well. I don't know.
One just wishes that industry in Europe was more flexible. I mean, sure, academia may find it hard to hire back from industry somebody who's spent 5 or 10 years in industry. We've, at the ERC, in our research center, made accommodations for that. But the industry itself is so bloody backward. Yeah. I mean, Europe, the major industries are those from the 20th century, pharma and automotive. South Korea, China, and others are in ICT, you know, information technology, yeah. And they're way ahead of us. And I mean, look what the backward, even the automotive industry, where it could change and go to electric, they're too bloody, you know, full of themselves to notice that. Look what it's doing to the German car industry at the moment. Yeah. So I despair, and I don't think it's for the funders or for the academics to do that. Industry has to think about itself and be more risk accommodating.
I should mention this document, the MidTech Trap. I think there's data that shows exactly this, that Europe is trapped in these types of industries and it's losing, has been losing in the high tech, and needs to change. Our industry needs to change.
Okay, so I think it's time to close. Just a quick note about mobility, because FCT, and maybe Francisco, you can develop more, we launched a mobility program for any geography for medium-term, short and medium-term stays. Is outgoing and incoming scheme, so it's important to go to the FCT webpage, and we have there the FCT mobility program. And Francisco, please develop a little bit more. So thank you so much. I think we take some message with us, collaboration not only inside Europe but across borders. Also the autonomy, the importance of the research autonomy and this ERC relevance, and how the ERC will be promoted and reinforced in the next FP10 is what we all expect. And thank you so much for your contributions, and we now have some time to hear Francisco about the ERC-Portugal program. Thank you.
We now move to the last segment of today's agenda with the Vice President of FCT, Francisco Santos.
So good morning. Thank you so much for coming. So I'm responsible for changing gears back. I will go back to the details of FCT program, in this case, the ERC-Portugal program. And I will start from here. So once again, thank you to Lisboa for hosting us here. It's a pleasure to be here. So what I'm going to do, I will try to go through the ERC-Portugal program. The goal is a bit to raise questions from you. We'll be around, of course, after this session. I'll be also happy to answer questions that you have regarding this program or any other program launched by FCT. So as we noticed, we are in the right mood. So Portugal has shown kind of notable increase in terms of attraction of money from ERC. We have an increase. So for instance, if we compare H2020 with Horizon Europe, we have 7 years in one side, we have only 3 years on the right side, we are already over 100 million. Comparing with H2020, we are quite well. Concerning acceptance rate or success rate, we are not so well, so we have space to grow. And Portugal is happily, let me see if this works, is happily increasing also the slice of ERC cake in a consistent way as well. So we have excellent examples in advanced grants. So if you compare advanced grants from the past, so if you go for Horizon Europe, we already have 11 funded proposals compared with 8 funded proposals in the past. Be aware that 9 of these 11 are double or triple grantees, so we still have work to do here. And we have another, so there is always this reasoning in Portugal that social and human sciences are not so competitive in these terms. This is actually not true any longer. So it's excellent to see that we already having 17 funded proposals in social and human sciences compared with 25 funded proposals in the previous block of ERC. But we still have space to grow. And there is clear 3 axes where you can increase clearly. So the first of all is, of course, the levels of national participation, the fact that you need to be more competitive. So the success rates suggest that. And we need to broaden the spectrum of institutions that actually push and help their researchers to apply to ERC. So to give you an example, more than 50% of our national ERCs are settled in only 6 research centers. So this shows that we have space to grow. So there are traditions that are not embedded in some places. We have outstanding researchers that focus on collaborative research. They are extremely good in attracting funding from H2020, Horizon Europe, but from different tracks, collaborative tracks and so forth. So there's different schools of thought. And some say, I don't have the time, I have too much teaching. So it's something that we need to work on. And here FCT tries to provide some help on this, okay? And that's a bit the idea of the ERC-Portugal program. So the first thing that we launched was this very simple idea to value and promote a continuum between European funding and Portuguese level funding. So the fact that if you apply and you are successful in applying but not getting the fund, the Portuguese Science Foundation will provide funding, the equivalent funding of a national 250K project. So this is basically stating that you may apply to European level and in fact get a Portuguese project as a return as long as your project is nicely evaluated. But this is the first step. And what we have done is extending this to this 2.0 ERC-Portugal program to go to the entire cycle of building a proposal. So we'll start from the left side where you build this ERC pre-assessment program. The goal here is to help from the start our researchers to build a successful and competitive application. And this is done by asking former panel members from ERC panels to help on these. And this is really nice because they go line by line, word by word, providing the needed help that some of our researchers need. And finally, if if, for instance, if you apply for ERC and you don't get the funding, but you get well evaluated, you can, of course, benefit from the A project system, but also benefit from the pre-assessment and go back to the loop. And if you are very successful and you are good enough in terms of building an application that gets this funding, it's also important to retain or attract the talent that managed to do this. And the goal here is, with these ERC careers, is to provide a line of funding which allows not only institutions, national institutions, to retain their good applicants, their grantees, but also to give muscle to our institutions to go abroad and offer something that other institutions abroad cannot offer. And this is what ERC careers is all about. So the goal here is to provide the means for universities, research institutions in Portugal to create small teams that identify strategic colleagues outside that are able to bring them here, providing the means to create a lab, to create funding, to provide conditions in terms of teaching and whatever the institution and the grantee needs. FCT, again, I will follow the words by Maria Leptin, scientists know best. So that's the starting point of all of these elements that we have here. But let me start with the first one. So the goal here is very simple. So what we have, we create a service. This is not really a funding scheme, it's a service that provides guidance reflecting both the evaluation criteria, but also the profile of the ERC reviewers. So we build a college of evaluators that provide the means to replicate the type of evaluation that you have at ERC. So the goal here is to pick former ERC panel members, and we have two tracks. And why do we have two tracks? So we have track step 1 and step 2. The goal is very simple. Given that researchers need to submit their proposal beforehand, some researchers have their proposal completely finished up 3 months before submitting. Some others are finished at the end, just before the deadline. So we predict these two tracks. So step 1 is for researchers that have the B1 part of ERC ready, and step 2 is for those that have the B1 and the B2 part ready for assessment in this context. Okay? It's very important. The participation in this program requires the commitment of the researchers to submit their proposal, as obviously. So in step 1, what is the difference between step 1 and step 2? So if you are building up your proposal, it is reasonable that we assign less resources. So we have a single reviewer evaluating or providing feedback. So this is not really an evaluator, basically. We can see it as a trainer, a coach. Basically, you have a coach helping you building your proposal. So you receive one report from this college of reviewers, and we'll make sure that this reviewer is coming from the panel where you are applying to. Okay? What happens in the step 2? If you have the B1 and the B2, then we will assign 3 reviewers, 3 ERC panel reviewers. The goal here is not to provide a consensus, so we have 3 reports. We do not provide consensus. The goal is to provide to the researcher these 3 reports in raw terms. The researcher will know how to mix up these 3, and also the college, these three reviewers will happy also to meet you in a Zoom talk, in the Zoom chat. So you could go for up to 3 online meetings, and the reviewers typically are very happy to help on this. There is really, really a good feeling with respect to these evaluators working with us. They really want to help. It's something that is really, really comforting and touching, I would say. So currently, we do already have some initial results. So we have 4 editions: starting grant, consolidated grant, advanced grant, and starting grant again. So we already supported 86 researchers, and we already built up a college of 84 members of ERC panels. We do already have 184 reports and several online meetings. So things are going nicely. Just for these 4 editions, we are already supporting 25% of the national applicants. So this started with the pilot, so we are growing this pilot, and things are working nicely. This increase in the numbers of applications submitted to starting grant 2004 and advanced grant 2004, they are quite neat, but of course, I cannot tell you that this is a result of the pre-assessment. Of course, it could be other stuff, but this increase shows that this type of initiatives could help, but I'm not suggesting that this is the result of the pre-assessment. But the new part, the new thing that we can also tell you is that we are already building up with the same college of evaluators, we are already building up a setting for training, for mock interviews, and these will start in 2025, especially for those that follow the pre-assessment path. We are also, the good feeling with respect to these evaluators is that they are also showing openness to participate in capacity building actions of EFCT, and things are kind of working very well on this regard as well. So let me go to the A project. So the A project is pretty simple. So we have 250K euro projects attributed, funding without any further evaluation. Those applicants to ERC that were successful, that got an A evaluation without getting the funding. So this is pretty simple. You apply to ERC, you get an A, you just send us an email, and we will transfer this funding to your research center. The only commitment from you is to say, please apply again. That's the only thing that we ask to the researchers, is to commit to a new application. So there is no bureaucracy involved. These will be lump sums, the new setting of FCT, where you don't have any kind of receipts. We fund science, we evaluate science, we don't control receipts, we go only for the scientific outputs. Sorry. So we are already supporting several researchers on this regard. So we already have 10 projects already funded. We expect 7 additional ones very soon, and 2 are already in a contracting phase. And here we show that social and human sciences are only the ones missing here, but I'm sure that they will pop up very, very soon. The new thing, the novelty around these 8 projects is that given that these things are working quite well, we are adding the synergy grant to the package. So if you have a top evaluation within the synergy grant, you also get the same type of funding. The only difference is that, of course, it's not really the same thing. It's a collaborative project. You have a baseline value of 150K, and then you sum another fraction that depends on the fraction of the budget that you have in your application. Again, you don't have any further evaluation. We trust the evaluation done by ERC. We follow it. And the goal here is to avoid the usual stuff that we do here in Portugal. You apply to ERC. It works well. Sometimes it doesn't. And then you have to reshuffle your application to apply for Portuguese money. We assume that you only need to do this once, and then the evaluation will proceed as such. So we provide a continuum between European level funding and national funding. So finally, the ERC-PT careers. So the idea is simple, to attract and retain ERC grantees in Portuguese institutions, and we are not really looking for the funding or the money of the ERC grantees. We really want the people. And that's the important thing. And that's why we don't really care if your ERC has already been finished abroad, for instance. We want the institutions to get the power to go outside, and if you find someone that is interesting for the research strategy of your institution, for you to bring this person to your institution, irrespectively if the ERC grant has finished or not. That's not the goal. The goal here is to provide the means for the institution to identify someone, to speak with this person, bring this person to Portugal. And that's a bit the idea. To bring, but also to retain. And that's the one important issue. So we have two axes, attract. So this is the fact that whenever you bring someone from abroad to Portugal, FCT will transfer immediately €500,000, 0.55 million euros directly. The institution can do whatever they feel with this money, to build a lab, to hire someone to give the classes of this researcher, to pay the salaries. It doesn't matter. It's their choices. FCT will not intervene in anything that is related with the strategy, intrinsic strategy of the institution. And then we have also the mode retain, because it's important to build a system, an instrument that allows institutions to retain their best talent. And here it works exactly or very similar to what we have in FCT tenure. FCT will pay 2/3 of the salary for 3 years. It's a kind of fast track for FCT tenure for those that know what FCT tenure is. One important thing, this only applies for permanent positions and only applies for as equivalent of associate professor and full professor. So you cannot bring an ERC grantee and offer him or her an assistant professor position. So that doesn't work, okay? Important, this follow-up track that I told you before, it's also important. You could also see it as something similar to a ERC proof of concept, but the money is much higher and the constraints are much lower. So this is competitive in these terms as well. So we are paying around 450K for this follow-up for those that already finished the ERC, and this can be nicely compared with the funding that we receive from a ERC proof of concept, so the value is actually higher. For this, we need a team, and I put here some of the faces that you meet whenever you interact with FCT with respect to ERC-Portugal. So many of them are here in this room, so please go ahead. If you feel like asking something very precise, we'll be very happy to answer. So this is the structure. So we have the annual College of Reviewers, a system that we are also implementing in trying out in different instruments of FCT, and we have these three axes and the ERC-Portugal team underlying this. So as a side note, let me give a couple of side notes that are interesting for you to position this type of instruments within the scope of all FCT instruments. So pre-assessment is not really a funding scheme, it's a service. And this is part of a universe of services that FCT also provides. Many of them, you use it every day. Typically, we forget that it's coming from FCT. So I'm putting here some of the examples of instruments that we currently have, from Colibri, Beyond, whatever. All of these are coming from FCT, and they are quite useful, as you know. A second note is related with a project. So this model fosters or promotes a system where you create synergies between different sources of funding for science. We combine European level funding with national level, so you apply to the European side and you provide national money. But actually, this is a strategy that, for obvious reasons, FCT is trying to embrace. So the goal here is to provide synergies between the national budget combined with RRP. By the way, RRP, it's something new for FCT. FCT didn't get an euro from RRP, Portuguese RRP, until 1 year ago or so. So it's something new. So we are enjoying for the first time a few euros from RRP, which is excellent news. But this is something, the fact that you can apply for European money and get national money, we are also using within EuroHPC for high-performance computing. We actually have the other way around last year. So we had the national call, and EuroHPC would pick some of the applications that were not selected. And we are trying to continue this type of track. By the way, for those that need computing power, we already have synergies between the national calls for computing power and the normal projects like exploratory projects and others. So if you get funding from one side, you get immediately computing power without further need for scientific evaluation. We are also building up other sorts of synergies that soon will pop up in the next 2 months. So it's important to see that FCT can work as a proxy for research and development strategies from other ministries besides the Ministry of Education, Science and Innovation. So it's very interesting that the health side does have a research and development strategy that will be executed as a proxy to reach the academia throughout FCT. As such, the budget of FCT will grow a little bit using this type of collaborations, this synergy. I'm speaking about health, I'm speaking about environment and energy, I'm speaking about defense, I'm speaking about digitalization and modernization, the youth minister. So you'll see several of these projects, calls for projects popping up. You'll see the Science for Policy call that many of you may know. So that will continue. The other axis is the combination between national and regional levels. So we don't have one funding agency in Portugal. We have FCT and then we have one for each region. So it's important that FCT provides synergies with these agencies that you know. So for instance, the PTDC, the last PTDC call was not launched by FCT, it was launched by PT 2030 with FCT providing the scientific evaluation that is completed, of course, but this is just an example of the type of synergies that altogether allow us to guarantee that our calls for projects do have an acceptance or success rate above 20% these days, all of them. So it is something that provides the means, but we have problems. And here, one of the problems is that sometimes FCT works as a proxy, sometimes FCT works as a funder or co-funder of these systems, and we are working very hard to make sure that in 2025, we do already have FCT also working as a proxy to the PT 2030 calls. And this is quite important. Our goal here, and we are working very hard to do this, is to, instead of having scientists applying for the PT 2030 platforms, we have FCT applying to these platforms to be able to launch a call where everyone can apply throughout the Portuguese FCT platform. And that's the goal. It's not easy, because if it will be easy, everyone will have done it in the past. And we are trying hard. And if we do this, this is a changing point within funding of FCT, because then we have the control of the calendar of the calls, we have the control of the platforms, we have the control of the evaluation process, and then we have the control on the way funding is then transferred to the final scientists. So this is a turning point if we manage to do this, and that will be something truly important. ERC careers, now we speak about people. This is really important here. So ERC careers provide the means to hire Portuguese or foreign scientists to come to Portugal or remain in Portugal. But as we mentioned in the previous roundtable, it's really important that our scientists continue to go abroad. And when I say abroad, it's not going for a conference, it's to have situations where you can have medium to long-term stays abroad. And this is particularly important to build networks, to build collaborations, and this is something that we have just launched. It's called the FCT Mobility Program. It's pretty easy. You just send a small abstract with the science that you feel like doing abroad, with whom you are going to work with. FCT has this called permanently open. You just evaluate. We have checkpoints, always evaluating to be as fast as possible. FCT will not ask a single receipt from you. We just pay a fixed amount per month, and that's it. So there is no bureaucracy associated. So this is completely bottom-up. Scientists know it best than anyone, where they should go, the geography, where they should go, which topic they would like to work on, that's up to the scientists to decide. So that's the one novelty. It's also important that to keep our researchers in Portugal, we need to make sure that they feel at home. And along these lines, having family-oriented calls is very, very important. And in this context, we will continue to launch the Restart program dedicated for researchers that are parents, father, mothers, that would like to restart after a parental leave. They have a specific call to apply to, and this will also remain as one of our priorities, not only in terms of gender equity and ensuring equal opportunities, but also as a measure of retention and attraction of talent. So both things go hand by hand. These ERC careers also contributes to the numbers that we should also be aware of. So, and from October, so this trimester until the end of 2025, FCT will fund 1,775 new positions, starting new positions. Some of them are associated with calls that are already finished, others that will be launched. But that's the number that one should be aware of. But one thing that is interesting in this number is the fraction of positions associated with permanent positions. So this is a big transition with respect to what FCT has been funding. We are putting here more than 2/3 of the positions funded by FCT are permanent positions. And this is a big change in terms of the philosophy of funding within FCT. It's important for retention of talent. It's important for attraction of talent, because it's hard to bring someone out from outside to have a fixed-term contract. But it's also important to be aware that this is also mandatory or important given the large number of contracts that are currently finishing within Portugal. Here I'm giving you the number, 1,171 contracts finishing in the same period as I mentioned above. And this is something that tries not only to answer, but to provide a different perspective on how research careers are perceived within FCT, but also in the broader picture, if you consider the new ESIC, the new Estatuto da Carreira de Investigação Científica, the research law that has been currently is under discussion and has been promoted by the Minister of Science and the Secretary of State in terms of science. But to do this, to make this transition from fixed-term contracts to 2/3 of permanent contracts, we need to face the strategy of FCT as also to enlarge. The focus of FCT as also to enlarge. So typically FCT interacts with that corner of the spectrum of Portuguese science, basically research units and laboratory associated labs and so forth. These are typically research units without a fiscal number, very fragile in legal terms. They don't have actually the power to hire typically, and if I exclude the largest associated labs. So it's important, if you want to discuss research careers in Portugal, we need to look at these two sets. We need to look and interact directly also with higher education institutions. Higher education institutions are the ones that hire permanently our researchers, and it's very, very important to realize that in the same way that this system focus on the research units allowed us to grow our research in Portugal very, very, very fast, it's now the time to make it more mature and to make it solid from the point of view of research careers. If you go very fast with fixed-term contracts, it's fine, or it's not fine, but it's okay. But now we have the time to make it, to design the model that we will have in the next 20 years. And this is particularly important because at the same time that we are facing this finishing of contracts, we are also facing a large number of retirements within the higher education system. So we are selecting now the next generation for the next 20, 30 years of researchers in Portugal, and we are in the crossroad of deciding which profile we would like to have in the next 20 years. Are we going to choose our professors and researchers based on the same type of lines that we have chosen 30 years ago, basically to answer specific needs in terms of teaching duties, to teach Algebra 1 or Molecular Biology 3, or if you would like to go directly and to answer the research strategies designed and built up by research units and their higher education institutions. So that's our challenge here. In the same way that research units and research in Portugal has grew very, very, very fast in the last 20 years, the higher education institutions are also transforming themselves, keeping in mind or having the focus of research as their priority. Is very important. FCT helps on this transformation and provides the means to, and the incentives, as the Secretary of State was mentioning, to put the incentives in the right place to make sure that the research strategies are emerging, solid research strategies are emerging in higher education institutions, and that these strategies are aligned with the research units. And here FCT plays an important role because it can provide these incentives, and we are trying to do in the last year or so. You have seen FCT 10 and our incentives precisely to the fact that, one, we need to select the next generation. Two, there should be incentives for selecting this next generation based on research, not exclusively on teaching needs. And this is a particularly important change also in this regard. Of course, many higher education institutions were doing this already, and some others will benefit from this incentive. Afterwards, I'm sure that in 5 or 10 years, we'll be better off in terms of research. The second point here is very important to look at also at this side of the spectrum. We should promote a greater diversity in terms of strategies within higher education systems, institutions. We don't need to do all the same. We have institutions that can be more close to fundamental research, others more applied. It's perfectly fine. FCT here should fund good science, irrespectively if it is fundamental or more applied. Good science is here, and is the important thing here, and more importantly, is that we need to give the word to our researchers. If our researchers would like to do more applied research, that's fine. If it is good, we are here to fund. And this gets closer also to other important aspects that we heard before in our roundtable, is to make sure that we have more intersectoral mobility. And this is an important thing. So let me go a bit more precise. Let's imagine that we have these two axes. So we have seniority in the y-axis. I have contract stability on the x-axis. This is standard FCT way of funding research careers. So we have the standard PhD, postdoc, 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 postdoc. These 6-year postdoc that are renewable, and we can continue with 6-year postdoc and so forth. So what we are doing here is changing these to a diagonal. So we are moving here. It's perfectly fine to have postdocs, early career researchers with fixed-term contracts. Shouldn't be very long, otherwise we go back to the previous system. And that's why we have now postdocs with 3 years and not with 6. This is an important modification to make sure that there are the incentives to move either to this side or to signal that our PhD should look at the other path from the very start, not 20 years after having a position in a research institution. And these two axes that really matters, but there are other axes that really matters. Now I invite you to look at the same y-axis, early career researchers, late career researchers, and synergy with non-academic entities. This is a standard FCT model of funding research careers. So we get the same profile, but completely fit on the left side of the spectrum. What we are doing here is to value diverse research careers. The researchers are the ones that pick. If they would like to do good science more related with basic research, that's fine. If they would like to build synergies with non-academic entities, and by non-academic entities, I'm not really speaking about necessarily companies. I'm speaking about museums, I'm speaking about hospitals, I'm speaking all the public sector that will benefit from having our PhDs. I don't know how many museum studies PhDs the universities, the Portuguese universities have. They have quite a few. I don't know how many do we have in the Portuguese museums. So this intersectoral mobility is very, very important. So we are trying to fit in instruments and incentives on the right side of the spectrum, and we are currently having at the FCT 2 tracks. So we have the more traditional academic path, but then we have on the right side the non-academic path that is as academic as the other one. But the only difference is that, for instance, here I have PhD grants where I have a single supervisor within the university. In the non-academic PhD grants, I do have two supervisors, one at the university and the other one at the museum or the National Library next door, or at the hospital, or in the company. It doesn't matter. So again, what is really important here is to have freedom, and freedom of opting from one side or the other. And it's also important to make sure that intersectoral mobility exists. And this is an important aspect, because if for intersectoral mobility to exist, we need to have proper tools for research assessment. And that's why in the last 1.5 years, we have changed completely the research assessment within FCT. We pushed forward the creation of the Portuguese chapter of COARA. The goal here is to make it more inclusive, less quantitative, and more qualitative, which allows me as a researcher, if you wish, if I would like to build a prototype in the morning and write a Nature paper in the afternoon, FCT has to look at both, not only at the Nature paper in the afternoon. And this is an important aspect that needs to be accounted here, and that's one thing that we have implemented. It's also important to have this missing link here. So we had the FCT tenure, we have the ERC careers. Within the FCT tenure, we have the non-academic chairs, which were basically chairs in universities that were co-funded by non-academic entities. And there is a growing interest in this layout, actually. The goal here is to, again, to go in the direction of what André has told a few minutes ago, the fact that we have universities, we have non-academic entities, and we have to close this gap. This gap can be closed in many different ways. I can have chairs, university professors in one side working in collaboration with the other side. I can have non-academic PhDs working as a bridge. And then I do have companies that have the power to have research and development departments inside their house, but then I have very small scale startups that do not have the scale to do this. And then they outsource this type of needs to the universities. Both models exist in Portugal, and they are both fine. So in one side, you have the non-academic chairs that answers these needs of having an unbubbled chair at the university X or Y, or we may have also non-academic postdocs that will be launched in the first trimester of 2025, which is exactly as the one. They are researchers, but the term postdoc is used here not in the right way, for the simple reason that truly this is a non-academic tenure. Why? Because these researchers will apply to FCT exactly as old SEX, the acronym is horrible, I'm sorry, in English it even sounds worse, awful, even worse. But they will apply exactly in the same way, but instead of saying that I will build my project at University X, I will build within a museum, a library, it doesn't matter, and will be, or a company, and will be hired by this company. And by being hired by this company, they will be entitled to have a contract as normal workers will have a contract in Portugal, and they will become tenured very nicely as such. I will stop here. If you have any question, please let me know, and we'll be glad to answer. Thank you so much for coming. I'm not sure if I have time to answer questions from you. If not, thank you once again.
Person, attract and retain, or attract or retain?
Attract or retain.
Okay, thank you.
So if you
fast.
Retain is for those that are in Portugal and you want to retain them. Attract for those that are coming from abroad.
But if you attract, you could retain them because they're already here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It may happen. It may happen. Yes.
Thank you. I just had a question regarding the ERC Portugal careers. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Thank you.
Question, thank you. A question regarding the ERC Portugal careers. You talk about grant holders. Does this also include researchers if they are funded through their institution? So an FCT funded researcher within their institution, but not necessarily attached to a specific project or grant.
You are asking for a project or the ERC career?
ERC career, so to retain, if you talked about retaining talent and researchers.
FCT will not impose any kind of restrictions with respect to the science to be produced by this researcher, or any kind of change with respect to the line of research. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but...
No, I was meaning in terms of the categorization of a researcher, whether it's only for researchers who have attached to a specific project, or whether they are conducting research that's FCT funded, but for a research centre that's not necessarily attached to a specific project.
I'm having a hard time to understand your words. Can I join you after?
Yes,
do you have 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Sorry, sir.
Good morning. Can you
Yes,
hear me? Yeah. So I'm Francisca Vasconcelos from the Gulbenkian Institute for Molecular Medicine. I work as a pre-awards grants officer, and as GIM, as the institution, is extremely happy with the initiatives taken by FCT, the ERC-Portugal, the pre-assessment. We are really happy with feedback we obtained from the reviewers, and we thank you for this initiative. And we also benefited from the initiative of the A projects. However, regarding the A projects, currently we are experiencing a bit of a delay on the attributions of funding from FCT to our institution, and we would like to ask if this problem is going to be solved soon.
So delays in funding is something that we try to reduce as much as we can, but I can assure you that FCT now do have a very fast processing procedure, especially with A projects. There is no receipts to control. So as long as the money gets into FCT, it's immediately transferred to the researchers. So if there is any delay from the central whatever transfer of money towards FCT, this delay passes by towards our researchers. We try to minimize these as as possible. Of course, this minimization requires to make choices. Of course, choices start with researchers. We cannot stop salaries of researchers, and sometimes the projects suffer a little bit on this. But I can guarantee that we do have good news. So I expect that this may be solved very, very soon. Okay, but I would need to pick exactly the right reference of your project to be sure of it. Thank you. And thank you for your words regarding the ERC-Portugal program. Please.
Thank you for your presentation. I have two questions, actually, if I may, otherwise just one. So the first one is about the ERCPT careers. I'm also a pre-award officer, so I start receiving many questions about this scheme. And the most common is, so I'm trying to understand how can we actually combine the need as a public university institution to recruit people through an open competition, an open call for competition, with the fact that we want to recruit that specific ERC grantee or previous grantee. And I don't really understand because we have to submit a permanent contract in order to get the funding for the ERCPT program. And the second question is about the EA project scheme. And so the applicant that receives this funding is as a commitment to resubmit. Does this mean that he or she has to resubmit the same proposal, an improved proposal, or a completely new? Because this would be incremental. Okay, you already answered this.
No, that's a very good question. So the A project assumes that the recipient will apply again.
Okay.
He or she will apply again, taking profit also from the money that he's receiving to create new preliminary results, exploring different areas, and from these additional studies, he or she can reframe completely the initial proposal, possibly creating a much better proposal, and that's the goal.
Okay.
Regarding the first question, so this is a kind of a subsidy for helping institutions to develop their strategies. The hiring strategy remains within the university. Okay, so I'm not saying how this, it's something that is a strategy. Universities do select individuals based on specific needs, specific research areas, and so forth. So this is something that is from the side of the university. But also, if you are an associate lab, you can also do the same thing. It's not only for universities, okay? And you are in a different framing. So the question is very good, but I would say that universities typically know how to hire. That's their job. Any other question? So, yeah, thank you.
So just a quick question. In order to benefit from the ERC pre-assessment program, can any researcher that fills in the conditions to apply to ERC grant benefit from this program, or will the FCT make a pre-selection based on the CV or any other criteria in order to define if the researcher will have the support of FCT or not?
That's a very good question. The fact that you are asking this is because I didn't explain it properly. So everyone is accepted. Thank you so much for your question. So this is an open call. Everyone can benefit from this. If your draft is not very good, our panel members will probably tell you that. So and it's actually very good anyway. So, but it's open for everyone. There is no pre-assessment for pre-assessment.
Thank you.
So, is there any other question? Okay, if that is the case, I will thank you once again And if you have any other questions that you prefer to ask privately, any specific issue related with FCT, or if you feel like FCT will step by your institution for a session explaining step by step what kind of measures, what kind of initiatives we are building up at FCT, we'll be also delighted to do so. So we are doing this across the country, and we'll be delighted to do it in your institution as well. Thank you so much. Do you have another?
This concludes the first ERC-Portugal event. Thank you all for your participation and see you soon.
A universidade é um espaço onde professores e estudantes se encontram e o avanço do conhecimento acontece. Mas poderá o ensino desligar-se da investigação?
O ensino e a investigação estão intrinsecamente ligados. Quer dizer que a investigação, ao gerar conhecimento novo, cria as condições para que, quando um investigador entra numa sala de aula, transmita o conhecimento mais atualizado, mais relevante e que, de certo modo, estimula também o espírito crítico dos estudantes. Por outro lado, é importante notar que o ensino prepara os profissionais da amanhã e prepara também os futuros investigadores. E, portanto, estão, por isso, intimamente ligados num ciclo virtuoso que gera conhecimento, gera inovação e gera um melhor ensino, uma melhor investigação numa instituição universitária.
O Horizonte Europa é o Programa Quadro de Investigação e Inovação da União Europeia para 2021-2027. Um dos seus componentes mais emblemáticos é o Conselho Europeu de Investigação, o ERC. A missão do ERC é incentivar e apoiar a investigação de fronteira, com base na qualidade.
Nós fazemos o nosso trabalho e fazemos com o maior rigor, com o maior entusiasmo, com a maior paixão, mas sabemos que o trabalho seguinte só pode existir se nos financiarem.
Cria numa instituição as condições ideais para desenvolver investigação de ponta que atravessa as fronteiras do conhecimento, que gera conhecimento novo, com uma liberdade total.
Durante 5 anos vamos poder ter as equipas a trabalhar em algo que nós consideramos muito importante e que somos apaixonados por fazer.
Isto é absolutamente essencial. Criamos condições, assim, no espaço europeu para atrair os melhores talentos, criamos um espaço europeu de investigação competitivo e de qualidade a nível global.
A quantidade de recursos que é necessário para conseguir estar ao nível dos competidores só se consegue fazer tendo uma equipa própria, tendo alguma escala, criando estrutura dentro da equipa, e é muito difícil conseguir assegurar essas coisas sem financiamento substancial.
Às vezes não sabemos como é que o vamos fazer, mas isso no final é bom e é algo que nos entusiasma a todos muito na equipa, porque também se já soubéssemos não valia a pena fazer o projeto.
Mas afinal, que impacto têm estes projetos na sociedade?
A ciência de descoberta pode contribuir para tudo e mais alguma coisa, porque é na descoberta que, no fundo, nós descobrimos novas coisas, novos aspectos, e com esse conhecimento é que, no fundo, se criam produtos que podem chegar às pessoas.
A Antártida tem reuniões anuais há mais de 6 décadas e o tópico de ordenamento de espaço marinho nunca tinha sido abordado. E este ano conseguimos que o tema fosse discutido de forma oficial.
Mais de 25% das bolsas ERC atribuídas em Portugal distinguiram projetos da Lisboa. E a Universidade continua empenhada em tornar os seus projetos mais competitivos.
A Universidade de Lisboa valoriza muito os investigadores que conseguem este tipo de bolsas e tenta também criar programas de aceleração que permitem que os investigadores se tornem mais competitivos quando se candidatam a bolsas ERC. O nosso objetivo é conseguir fazer este importe de informação científica para as tomadas de decisão política.
O projeto ERC não termina quando termina, o projeto ERC será bem sucedido se, quando terminar, cada um dos seus investigadores tiver já iniciado a sua própria linha de pesquisa.
Uma forma de continuar a linha de investigação que já tinha começado e abraçar desafios novos em áreas que ainda não tinha trabalhado.
Não há inovação sem ciência, não há inovação sem a criação de conhecimento. E a ciência é isso mesmo, é a criação de novo conhecimento.